It's migrating to Australia. It's that time. It's rolled around again. We're going to talk visa technicalities. I'm Grant Williams. In case you were tuning in to listen about knowing what you sign up to, knowing what you're agreeing to, I've really misled you. We're going to do that on Tuesday. So Tuesday, 7:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, YouTube, Facebook, and join us then. And David and I will discuss the importance of following directions. I'm Grant Williams. Hello, David Bongiorno, Australia's favourite immigration lawyer. Although you've had a run for your money this week, a certain Karina Ford, who we both have lots and lots of respect for, has been very busy doing the media round.
Good on her. I wish her well. She's fighting the good fight and has been doing so for a long time. How are you, Grant?
Well, as I mentioned before, I'm a little bit tired. It's in a migration podcast, David. It's World Albatross Day today. And as we're recording this, dear listener, it's also Juneteenth, so it's a very significant day in the calendar.
Just thought we'd do this week. Because we haven't done it for a long time. A recap on the 485 visa, because a lot of people, this is more for those who are in Australia, but those coming to Australia can learn something from it as well. A lot of people finish mid-year. Visas expire August 31. So I thought we'd do one on the 485 visa, which is the visa that students apply for and use once they finish their student visa.
And it's one of the few visas that I remember when we just say the number, the 485, the graduate visa. I think it's actually called the temporary graduate visa.
It's the temporary graduate visa. It depends on which stream you apply for. It can be 18 months long or 2 years long, 24 months long. The graduate work stream, the post-study work stream. And most people who are doing their bachelor's degree or their master's degree and have completed at least 2 years of study should be applying for the post-study work stream.
Now, David, is there any updates that have happened with the 485 as a result of our global pandemic, which we are still battling our way through? We'll
probably actually. It's an interesting point you raise, and what we should do is a separate podcast where we talk about people who hold 485s and are offshore. We can do a separate podcast on that. What we're doing today is talking about students here in Australia who have a 500 visa, a student visa, and are finishing the course mid-year, and also those who are finishing at the end of the year can gain some information, some important understanding of the process by listening to this podcast. If we put them together, it'd be too messy. It could potentially confuse people. And you and I are all about clarity on the Migrating to Australia podcast, maybe except for Tuesday nights.
Hey, David, I'm going to correct you on that. You're all about clarity. Sometimes I'm a hot mess, but
well, you've been up very early. You were talking to Mexico at 3:30 this morning.
I was talking albatrosses and petrels and skewers at 3:30 this morning, 3:30 a.m. to fit in with the good folk of Mexico and the Baja Peninsula and Guadalupe Island.
Oh, wow. Summertime be paradise there now.
Yeah, well, except for global pandemic.
You know what? We don't know much about what's happening in Mexico, so I hope everybody's safe. Today, anyone listening, remember, this is general information. And Grant, what happens when anybody relies on general information? What are they?
Well, they instantly transform into a galah and will be known by their friends and their professional acquaintances as a stupid drongo.
So, for those of you who don't know what a drongo is, Grant, you might elaborate?
Well, otherwise, we could just say, geez, mate, you're a clown.
Or a goose.
You're a goose, mate.
Our podcasts are general information, not legal advice. If anybody does want specific legal advice who's listening to the podcast, they're welcome to get in touch with me, and we'll talk about the way to get in touch at the end of the podcast. And it's all about diffusion of information, letting people understand the processes so that they can make informed decisions when they come to the end of their course.
And well, after so much hard work, and look, David, the graduates for this year, anyone who is completing their course mid-year or
At the end of this year,
in December,
they've done well.
Hats off to you. I mean,
done very well.
We will be talking about 2020 and 2021 as a period in time the same way that people talk about the Great Depression.
And you know what? You and I have had lots of discussions off air, and we've spoken to lots of students off air. It's tough. And to do it online is deeply, deeply difficult, deeply unsatisfying as a student experience. And also, you also wonder what they get for their dollar value, don't you, Grant?
Mate, I wonder that at the best of times.
But I mean, international students pay an exorbitant amount, and those who finish their courses this year or last year, we do tip our hats because you've been denied an experience and provided with a very difficult scenario in which to finish your degree. And a lot of people don't understand how difficult it is to take online classes in a second language.
And look, just stepping outside the boundaries that you drew at the beginning, David, my heart goes out to the people who are studying here but are offshore. So we'll do
another episode on that. That's
a special summary for them. But yeah,
that's even harder. And I mean, out of an abundance of caution, if you're thinking about studying in Australia, maybe wait until the borders drop so you can physically come, because to study in a different time zone is very difficult among many things. Overseas study, Australian institutions, online at the best of times is difficult. In these times, it's even more difficult.
Okay, now, well, let's kick into it, David. 485 temporary graduate visa. Which stream will you talk about now?
We'll talk about them both. It's a way to stay here after you've completed your course. Not everybody wants to stay, of course, Grant. And some people will take an Australian education, return to their home country. But those who want to stay and those who have done what's required are eligible to apply for what's called a 485 visa, the temporary graduate visa. And the story is it's two streams. There's a post-study work right stream, and that goes for 2 years. And in the 2 years, you've got, well, it's not really 2 years. It's about 27, 28 months. The visa lasts for 24 months, but the actual processing time's 3 to 4 months. Maybe it's even a little bit longer in this pandemic period. But what it does, it sets you up to apply for subsequent visas, express interest and apply for subsequent visas. There is the graduate work stream, and that's of 18 months, and with 3 or 4 months of processing, it's about 22, 23 months you've got in Australia to get yourself right for immigration. Most people who tick all the boxes for 485 visas most people should be applying for the post-study work right visa. If somebody's applied for and received their first student visa after 5 November 2011, then they're eligible, they're in the running. But I think mathematically, most people at uni would have applied for and received their first student visa after 5 November 2011. So that's the 2-year visa. And that is gold if you want to apply for independent migration. Now, independent migration in this time of COVID is difficult. Independent migration, 189 visa, 190 visa. We've talked about them in past podcasts, and we can touch on them again today because they're the holy, sacred, most important visas for those of you who want independent migration. With July and the pandemic, July's a new migration year, and when the new lists are out in July and potentially new processes, new systems, we'll talk about them when they come to hand. But to get a 485 visa, or to apply for a 485 visa, there's some steps that are quite dangerous if you miss out on them, and they can be quite costly. A person who's studying in Australia, who has a course at bachelor's level or master's level, is eligible, and we'll go through the steps, We'll go through the steps, because I think it's important to know that you don't get the visa, you lose out if you don't make sure you're eligible for it. That sounds obvious, but it stuns me the number of people who leave things to the last minute that are crucial to apply for a visa.
Before we go through the steps, David, can I ask the question that most people are probably wondering? What does
Fire
it
away, Grant.
cost? What does it cost to lodge the visa? And I'm not talking about
Legal fees.
no, I'm not talking about your legal fees, your professional fees that might be attached to it. Just the cold hard cash that gets handed over to the federal government.
If you're applying for a 485 visa, it's about $1,500, roughly. You apply online, electronic application, and for it to be lodged, receipted, and assessed, you pay it's just under $1,500. But July is coming, and people who are finishing their courses now, they'll be applying in a new migration year, so the fee may go up. This
David,
is relevant.
David, hold on. I've just heard it. Just thought of a cheeky question.
Go for it.
Does the immigration department accept Bitcoin?
It's a great question. Not as far as I'm aware. No.
Okay.
They do BPay, credit card, BPay and credit card. When we lodge applications, we use credit card authority, or BPay. BPay's better for some, but credit card is the way to go.
Okay.
The 485 is a visa for you to get ready for a 189 or a 190. 18 months for the graduate work stream, 24 months for the post-study work stream, with about 3 or 4 months for each category underneath it for processing time. Processing time is slow, but this is where it's good, because we have that point system we've talked about many times, and the 485 is an opportunity to get points ready. Grant, the heads we go through so often, but need to go through again because it's been a little while. When you're on a 485 and you want to apply for a 189 or 190, you look at your age, you look at your English, you look at your time spent studying in Australia, you look at what community languages you have, you look at a professional year you may have done, you look at Australian work experience you've gathered. The 485 is your opportunity to get migration ready for permanent residency, an expression of interest and permanent residency. Some people use the 485 to lie on the beach. Some people use the 485 to pursue a job that they've obtained during their student years and have no intention of applying for migration. But those who want to stay must use the 485 time for getting all the heads we've just mentioned right: age, English, time spent studying in Australia, community language, Australian work experience, Australian professional year. That's the opportunity to be ready.
David, let me stop you there. Work experience. Let's talk about the kind of work that will allow you to gather points if you're here in a bachelor's, the work experience.
If you're here in a bachelor's and you've satisfied the Australian study requirement, work experience for you must be relevant and on point or closely related. So we'll use accounting because it's still popular. Good Lord knows why. We'll use an IT example. You're skilled for Australian migration purposes once you finish your bachelor's degree. So any work you do during a bachelor's degree doesn't count for professions. You are skilled once you've completed your bachelor's degree. Now, you're also skilled if you do Australian work experience on your master's because you've got a bachelor's from your home country and a relevant qualification. So that's another way to get extra points. If you come to Australia with a degree in information technology and you've worked as a system analyst or a business analyst in your home country, you get 20 hours a week for a year during your master's degree. That's Australian work experience before you've even graduated. A lot of students come on bachelors, don't have Australian work experience, so they can't avail themselves at the early stage. Australian work experience manifests itself through tax returns, group certificates, pay slips, contracts, reference letters. And it's very easy in this country because we have paper trails for everything to gather that evidence. What doesn't count as Australian work experience, if you're a system analyst or a business analyst, but you work on a help desk, if you help in offices, old men like me who can't operate a mouse, that doesn't count.
Well, but David,
Yeah, they should probably get more points for helping me work out how to use a mouse. But the story is that you've got to work in your occupation, minimum of 20 hours a week, be paid the appropriate salary, appropriate rate, prorated. People who are accountants who take work as bookkeepers, accounts payable, accounts receivable, do not pass. People who
now,
are system.
David, sorry, David, I was thinking about IT, and 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 this will really annoy some of those people who have left us a review, David, because that stupid guy making a joke again. I did IT, David, and I'm an influencer. How do I? How do
Oh
I?
my word! My
How do
word!
I get my work? How do I credit my work experience as an Instagram influencer with my IT degree?
Counts for zero. Counts for
Oh,
zero. People have got to understand. Post bachelors, Australian work experience post bachelors has to be in your occupation or closely related. So system analyst, business analyst, accounting, tax accountant, business accountant, general accountant, all closely related.
so the point being that as a receivables clerk or a bookkeeper,
Money
that
in your
will
pocket,
not.
money in your pocket, but it
Yep,
does not help you in any shape or
yep.
form for 5 points Australian work. I mean, there's still too many accountants in the system, Grant, and it's my active mission for anyone who asks what I should study is I'll tell them this. I can't tell you what to study, but I'll happily tell you what not to study. And we must be advocates forever on the Migrating to Australia podcast for advising anyone listening not to study accounting, not to study childcare.
Not to study childcare unless they're doing a degree course.
Segues into a degree.
Yeah.
Childcare on its own is not sufficient for migration. A diploma in childcare is insufficient. The story of accounting, well, don't do accounting, don't do law, and unless you're very, very good, think twice about IT because it's incredibly competitive. July, post pandemic, July or post pandemic, accounting, IT may liberate, scores may drop, but I doubt it. I doubt it. It's not worth the risk. What happens with postgraduate work? If you've got a bachelor's in your relevant occupation and you're employed as an accountant, as a system analyst, as a business analyst, as a social worker, 20 hours per week does count. Okay. Now, Australian, go on.
David, you just mentioned scores or may drop.
May to
Current,
entice people
well,
back, come back to Australia.
yeah.
They may not. They may not.
We haven't stepped through how all the points work, but
We'll come to that. Absolutely.
Last time we did something on the graduate visa 485, I think you were getting a number of people with success at about 100 points. Is that still the case?
No, what's happening at the moment because of COVID? Good question. Because of COVID, well, what happened in October of last year? It reverted to quarterly invites for the 189. The 190 in Victoria was monthly, and it did the first 5 months. They did invitations for the first 5 months. There's nothing this round because the new migration year begins in July, 1 month's time. People have been invited for 189s based on their occupation and being present geographically in Australia. So we've had a number of people invited who've been in the medical field, and their scores have all been different. Over 65, up to 85, 90, but because they're doctors, they've been invited. So people who are being invited fight COVID at an economic level or at a physical health level. So people who are in allied health, we've been getting invitations for state sponsorship. Until COVID is done and dusted or learnt to be lived with, people who are in the medical health, allied health will be getting preference, I suspect strongly, in the new migration year and for the rest of the year to come. But that doesn't mean if you're starting a degree or you're into your second year of a degree in engineering or the dreaded accounting, social, it doesn't mean you won't have opportunities at the end because we don't have crystal balls. The federal government's not governed by, the immigration department's not governed by precedent. This is all about this session to empower people, give them knowledge so they understand what they're going to be doing in July, August, applying for a 485, or at the end of the year applying for a 485. Now, if July, the new migration year, brings changes, we'll talk about those in subsequent podcasts. But the 485 is a good visa to apply for Australian work experience, a good visa to apply for to get yourself ready if you wish to migrate or stay here before going home to join the family business. I mean, if you've got family business and it's a factory employing 2,000 people, Grant, I'll go back, you know. If you've got opportunity in your home country, you must think twice about whether opportunity in your home country outweighs the opportunity to start a new life here in Australia. Both are valid choices. With immigration, it's procedural in many ways, and it's the procedural aspects that upset the apple cart and see many people messing it up. Now, you and I are big fans of the following 3 life lessons. You do your own accounting. You live and die by your own accounting. The ATO chases you. You purchase your own property. You mess it up. The bank, the vendor, it's a mess. Same with immigration. You can do your own accounts. You can do your own conveyance in certain circumstances. You can do your own migration. Now, if you mess them up, they're catastrophic. A lot of people do a 485 and mess it up. One of the big ones is not applying for an Australian Federal Police check. Imagine ringing mum and dad and saying, Mum and Dad, I've just had my 485 rejected because I didn't hop online, go to the Australian Federal Police check website, take 10 minutes of my time to apply for a Federal Police check. Right? Now, little things like that can derail.
Now, the important thing about that, David, is that you have to apply for the state police check.
Federal police check.
But does that now cover the entire country?
Entire country.
Okay.
And the thing is, it's very easy to miss something like this. No Australian Federal Police check. The department won't stop you. You lodge your application, you answer no, it'll be rejected. It's non-appellable. You can take it to review, but you won't win.
Isn't it crazy that so many things that we have to apply for online have a sort of checklist and a helpful walkthrough menu, and if you miss something, you can't lodge, you can't apply, you can't pay, you can't buy.
It's
but
cruel.
Not the government.
It's cruel.
Yeah.
And another one is not making adequate arrangements for health insurance. Every student listening to this podcast in Australia, remember everybody, this is for those who are in Australia. Those who are in Australia, we'll do one for those who are outside Australia on 485s later. If you're here, you've got overseas student healthcare cover. If you apply for a 485, you must have special 485 health cover. Now, if you don't have that, your visa will be rejected again. These are innocuous.
Let's tease that out, David, that if you, while you are enrolled and a student,
you have overseas student healthcare cover.
Okay. How is that different to the special 485 insurance?
It's tied to your 500 visa. It's tied to your 500 visa, and it covers you for the duration of your 500 visa. That's all it covers you for, the duration of your 500 visa. When you apply off the end of your 500 visa for a 485, you must have in place 485 health insurance. It's a matter of ringing up Bupa or applying online. Ring Bupa. Hello, take 8 minutes. I did it for somebody the other day. My name is David. I've just finished my master's in architecture. I would like to have 485 health insurance cover. It's that simple. It's ringing Bupa.
And we better check all boxes, David, that if you have health insurance by any other agency, any other provider, it's just a matter of contacting them, and it's not actually rolling over your cover, but they will continue you with your details into a new policy.
Correct.
It's a distinct policy. And there will be a different pricing regime. So please pay attention to that as your course is finishing and you are about to enter into a new phase of life. So ends your health insurance, and you must dot that I or cross that T.
Most students finishing this time of the year have their visa expiring August 31. People who are finishing at Christmas time get the results late November, early December, have their visa expiring March 15 of 2022. So it's got to be done before then. Now, it's not hard to make a phone call to organise your health insurance. It's not hard to log online to the Australian Federal Police check, the Australian Federal Police to get an Australian Federal Police check. To miss these things is catastrophic. And people assume that because immigration law is prescriptive, do A, B, C, D, E, get outcome, it's easy. You miss C1, D3, E5, good night, Kalinita, buonasera.
And
Now,
as we've just pointed out, the process of going through the application online will not let you know that you have made a mistake or missed something. You will only find that out after you have paid your money and been rejected.
And what they will do, they won't reject you if you finish in December. If you finish your course in December, they won't reject you before March. If they reject you before March, you apply for a new visa. But if what they typically do is reject you in April after your visa's expired. They're cruel. Yeah, they're brutal. They're brutal.
And the practical ramifications of that are, David, that you either immediately
you lodge a review. You lodge a review for work, so you can get Australian work experience. But what you've got to do, you're Section 48 barred, and what that means is you cannot apply. You cannot apply for another visa on shore. If you've got merit in your review, you win. But if you've forgotten a police check, you can go to review, but you won't win. What happens in this scenario is you fly offshore and go home and apply for a permanent visa if you're eligible, or look to come back another way. But you cannot apply if you apply and mess up your visa, your Australian Federal Police check for your visa, you're gone. You're gone. You've got to look for other ways. You've got to look for, and depending on what you've studied and what you've done afterwards or what you've done before, dictates what you can and cannot do.
Now, David, I'll just interrupt you there for a minute, David, because we've had, dear listener, we do stream and we take questions as they come in. So bear with us listening on the podcast. Question: does this mean that other Australian student visa holders will be allowed to come into Australia? Now, I'll preface your answer, David, with we are going to do a separate episode for 485 temporary offshore graduate holders who are currently offshore. So what we're doing today is talking about students who are completing their courses this year and are already in Australia.
Physically present.
Yep. So as it stands, nobody is coming in on student visas at the moment, but some state governments are pushing for that to change.
South Australia and New South Wales.
And the last episode that we released talked about that, and we assume that there's going to be a bias to some courses and perhaps to residential students. So we don't know. It's a short answer to the short answer to the question is we don't know, but it's a really good question, and we have to do a separate episode.
It's a great question, and we might get our wonderful friend of the Migrating to Australia podcast, Belle Lim, back on, because she was talking in mainstream media about it yesterday. South Australia is introducing a program. New South Wales is introducing a program, but there are exceptions for certain courses and certain people, but a person offshore on a 485 who's done a Bachelor of Commerce in accounting or a bachelor's or master's in IT or social, whatever they've studied, they won't be allowed back in until the borders drop. Now, English is something that everybody frets about. The IELTS test, the PTE test, you might have, if you've come from Singapore or Malaysia or Western Europe or United Kingdom, maybe you've, through international schooling, you have not had to do the test to get your student visa, but everybody has to do the test if they're not Canadian, US, New Zealand, Irish passport holders. If they're not passport holders from English-speaking jurisdictions, they've all got to sit the test for the 485. Now, the 485 and the IELTS test. The IELTS test, as we've had Ali talk about on the previous podcasts, Ali has said it's a test that can be learned. It's not a reflection, you and I know, Grant, it's not a reflection of how good you are at reading, writing, listening or speaking. If you can do an Australian degree at bachelor's or master's level, you clearly have a mastery of the language in all 4 disciplines. This is a test of how good you are at doing a test. See the difference, Grant?
I do, David. I do. And it's just like doing any exam. You can learn how to do exams separately to learning the content of your course.
Correct. And we always like the medical to be done in a timely fashion. That's another thing you've got to consider. The health authorities, the department, are worried about Hep B, Hep C, HIV, tuberculosis, diabetes. These are things that can get in the way of a successful visa grant. A successful visa grant. There you go. But basically, if you've got all your cards organised, it's a painless process. But if you are only half-baked, I seriously advise you consider coming to someone like me or somebody from your own background linguistically you might feel more comfortable talking with. Don't do your 485 on your own. Don't do it. Now, it sets you up for the 189, the 190, the expression of interest if you've got an occupation. Now, English is easy. If you prepare for the test. Get tuition. I have referred medical clients, legal clients, IT clients who are masters of the English language to tutors so they learn test technique. Serena Williams, Roger Federer, they have coaches. Just because you're brilliant doesn't mean you can't benefit from a coach. A coach will show you where you're weak. You don't know where you're weak.
The point I make when we talk about, excuse me, the benefit of a coach or a lawyer, a professional on your side, is that to live here for another 2 years, excuse me, for another 2 years is a very, very costly exercise.
Yes.
Don't skimp on the imagined cost of a 30-minute session with someone who knows what they're talking about. As much as I think, David, that we deliver a podcast that is of extreme value, the podcast does not possibly substitute for sitting across the table from somebody who can then look over your documents and your application and give you some advice, not some general information as we are doing now.
Not a general information session like here. Correct, Grant. And I always say this: look at what you've spent to come here, stay here, and earn your degree. Then compare it with the cost of a linguistic, an IELTS PTE tutor, or a legal representative, or a migration agent representative for your 485 and subsequent visas. You'll find the cost to get to the need for representation legally or through migration agent is nothing like the cost you've incurred to get to your visa, earn your visa. And
I'll just throw this one at you, David. What does it cost to register for and sit the English language test, let's say IELTS?
it's $330. Now, I've seen and heard of people who've done it 8, 9, 10 times. And if I come across somebody who's done it that many times, I'll ask, did you have a tutor? And almost inevitably, no, I'm tutoring myself. Well, they don't know where they're wrong. They don't know where they're going wrong.
So if you don't get let's say you're aiming for 8
8
in
in each
all
band.
bands, in all of the bands, which will get you how many points, David?
20 points.
20 points. So, and if you fail twice and front up a third time, that's cost you
$1,000.
basically $1,000, and you're going to try and say, oh, I didn't want to spend $120 with a tutor.
That's right. That's
Yep.
right.
Dumb.
Absolutely. 100%. Because what the 485 is, it's a period, like we've said, you lie on the beach, work in a business unrelated to your occupation, or prepare yourself for migration. And most people want to prepare themselves for migration if they've got an occupation, if they're eligible. And the heads under which you're assessed are your age. Your age is important. The older you are, well, the older you are to a certain extent, the better it is. That is 25 to
Except
32.
except if you're as old as you and me.
We're too old to migrate. We're way too
We're
old.
out. We're scrubbed.
We're dead. 18 to 20, the statutory minimum you've got to get to express interest. Expressing interest is, I'm David Bonjour, I'm Grant Williams, I have X points, Y points, I want to apply for migration. Well, age knocks us out, so we can't. But the categories are age, and 18 to 24 gets you 25 points, 25 to 32 gets you 30 points, 33 to 39 gets you 25 points. When you hit 40, you're in the home straight. You know, you're not in the home straight, you're on death row. Because from 40 to 44, you get 15 points.
When you get to 40, you can get a partner visa or you can get a tourist visa.
Now, there's nothing wrong with a partner visa. A partner visa is a legitimate tool. It's a legitimate.
But you are not applying for a graduate visa. That's the point I'm getting.
You can and you get it, but you'll never get a 189 visa because you're too old and your points will be too low.
Yeah.
Age is important. 25 to 32, because you'll be more readily employable than 18 to 24. You've got life experience. You know how to do interviews. You know how to make a good impression. 25 to 32, you're more employable than 18 to 24. 25 to 32, you're in the system paying tax faster, more often, because you enjoy, or you're supposed to enjoy, more continuous employment at 25 to 32 than the sporadic piecework employment of 18 to 24. Now,
but David, age is just a number.
It used to be, if memory serves me correctly, years ago, 18 to 30, but they put 18 to 24 and they dropped 5 points because those in that category apparently are less likely to get full-time employment than those in 25 to 32.
David, they're working full-time on their Instagram.
Do I detect a degree of frustration? Are you a wannabe influencer, Grant?
No, I've just been seeing too much news that has the word influencer in it. I mean, it's not work.
It's not work at all, no. English test, your English language ability. For immigration, your IELTS test lasts for 3 years. Now, IELTS and PTE, because we're talking about onshore, IELTS and PTE are run every week, and it's very easy to get a test, book it and do it. Obviously in Victoria, there's been problems with COVID lockdowns and, hello to everybody studying in New South Wales and Queensland. We're just out of lockdown. What it means is you've got to book it and do it in a timely fashion. Now, they last for 3 years, and people being people leave things to the last minute, so you don't want to miss out. So if you're finishing a course now, your visa expires August 31, book and do a test as soon as possible. We talk about points in the 485, even though the 485 is not points tested, because we've got to know what points we have to get on the 485 to be eligible at the end of the 485 for a 1.8 expression of interest and a 189 and a 190. You can't do a 485.
The 485 is a transition visa to another visa.
And to not think about your points on the 485 if you want to migrate is crazy. 6 in each band for reading, writing, listening, and speaking will get you 0 points.
Actually, David, if you don't want to migrate, feel free to go and lie on a beach.
Oh, enjoy. Absolutely, 100%. There's no
Yep.
compulsion.
If you just want to spend some time working and get some experience in Australia and immerse yourself in the culture and
You
follow
still
a
have to do
footy
English.
team or
You still
whatever.
have to do your
Yep.
English test. You still have to
But
satisfy various criteria, but you don't have to turn your mind on the 485 to boosting your English, getting Australian
that's
work
right.
experience, doing
That's
a
right.
professional year. You can relax. And I mean, hats off to you to have finished a degree here in a second language. It's not easy. It's not easy.
And take a lot of pictures and put them on your Instagram.
But if you have mum and dad who want you to migrate for a better life, you've got to turn your mind to these points we're discussing today. And you've got the bonus of slow processing is you have more time to achieve what you need to achieve. But to apply for a 485, you must have your English done. You must have it done. You must have the Australian police check applied for. You must have health insurance in place. Book and do a medical. Get everything front end load the 485. Front end load it. That's the key to success. If you've lodged and you've front end loaded everything, then you're in a good position.
And now, then really the only thing you're waiting for then is your results.
No, your result, you've got to have your results for your 485. You must have your academic transcript letter of completion to apply for your 485. You must have them. You must have them. Front end load it with these things. Course completion is essential. Academic transcript, letter of completion. If you're going to apply and you don't do those things, you'll be in trouble. You'll be rejected. What we're going through now is what you need to be able to display for a 485. You have age, you have English. Now, if you get 7s in each band applying for your 485, you've got a test worth 10 points for 3 years. If you get 8 in each band on applying for your IEL, on applying for your 485, then you enter your 485 or you lodge your 485 with an IELTS test of 8 in each band. You've got 20 points. So you know over the next 2 years of the 485 that you don't need to worry about English because you've already got the 20 points. Occupational English is the other test that's available.
Can I just stop you, David? You cannot get more than 20 points for English.
You
correct?
cannot get more than 20 points in your English. 6 in each band is 0, 7 in each band, or 65 in each band for PTE, or 79 plus in each band, 8 plus in each band is 20. Okay? Now, points. What happens if you haven't got your academic transcript, your letter of completion, you haven't booked, if you haven't got your academic transcript, your letter of completion, your IELTS done, your police check applied for or received, your medical book, you're going to have big trouble getting a 485. You'll be shut down. On the 485, look to get Australian work, or while you're on a bridging visa, look to get Australian work because skilled employment gives you extra points. Remember, it's got to be on point or closely related if you want to apply for an expression of interest and apply for a 189, a 190.
How does someone find out, David, in a field like IT or hospitality?
Well, hospitality is a chef, and it's very hard.
Okay.
It's very, very hard.
So
I mean, anybody contemplating chefing as a migration pathway, starting as a chef here is mad, is crazy. People who are chefs already who want to migrate, well, we can talk about that in the new migration year because we look pretty silly if the 189 list, the medium long-term strategic skill list for the new migration year did not include chef. But if it does include chef, it's a good way to go, but it's very hard still. But anybody wanting to study a trade here, it's a lot harder than anybody thinks.
I was just trying to get some idea, David, of who is a reliable arbiter to tell you if the work that you are contemplating doing or may have just begun will be sufficient. And I'm thinking maybe you are about to graduate from a degree in early childhood learning, right? What kind of work experience will be okay?
You want to get a job. You want to get a job as a pre-primary teacher. You might be for the first 6 months.
So working as an assistant in a childcare centre will not be okay, or is that something that might be borderline depending on what your responsibilities are?
What you do, and this is part of the work that I do, if somebody's comes in and they're finishing a course, I always say to them, when you get your job position description, when you get your job description, come and show me. And then I'll be able to tell you whether it will help or what needs to be developed as you progress so that it does become something of worth. When
you see what I did? You see what I did there?
Well, it's a great question. It's a great question because let's take engineers. In this country, engineers wear suits, casuals, and overalls. Engineer is a loosely bandied title. Somebody who's dressed in either of these three may or may not be an engineer. It's what you do. It's what you do. It's your position description. It's your job duties. You may have an odd title, a quixotic title. It's about your duties, what you do on your contract, because what you're doing when you apply for your Australian work experience to be validated by the Australian Computer Society, by IPA, CPA, by the Australian Institute of Teaching School. When you apply for your Australian work experience to be validated at skill assessment level or to be recognised recognised in application for a 189 or 190, you've got to make sure that your duties match what the department or what the skill assessing authority will look at. So if you've applied as a social worker and you're claiming 12 months of Australian work experience as a social worker, the case officer assessing your work will look at the ANSCO, the Australian New Zealand Standard Classification of Occupations for social work. And they'll cross-reference your duties with those, and you don't plagiarise because then you get rejected. You make sure your duties are, the essence of the ANSCO is in your duties, but your duties are at a higher level, a more advanced level. They'll look at what you do as an accountant on the Australian New Zealand Standard Classification of Occupations, but you have to operate at a higher level. The essence of them has to be there, but you don't copy, because if you copy, you'll get rejected. And if you copy, they'll know you've copied and it's all over. Basically, the Bible, the dictionary, the Torah, the Quran, by which they assess is the Australian New Zealand Standard Classification of Occupations. And they'll say, all right, Grant is a system analyst. Grant is a software developer. Grant's a social worker. And they'll look at what the position description says.
David, you've gone mute. What have you done? Oh, there you are.
Dear listeners, I'm dialing into Grant on my mobile phone, and my father just rang me.
Oh, and that
rides over StreamYard for some reason. There you go.
Well,
the vagaries of technology. So what I was saying, with the Australian work experience, you will be verified against the Australian New Zealand Standard Classification of Occupations. And if your duties are not the essence of what's captured, then you'll struggle. That's why I always say, don't do IT support desk. Be a system analyst, be a business analyst, be a software developer, be a network programmer, be whatever you are and have the duties to back it up.
Yes, generally you need to be making management decisions at a professional level.
We might break down. We might do a podcast where we look at some job descriptions and cross-reference them against the ANSCO, just to give people an idea. I think that's a good one. But what happens is,
and perhaps we could get someone from the institutes or the associations to join us and workshop a couple of.
I think IPA, CPA might be up for that.
Yeah,
I think ACS might be up for that. I think the Australian the assessing body for Australian social workers might be up for that.
And I think Engineering Australia will ignore us like they have every time I contact them.
If anyone from Engineers Australia is listening, we still love you. Just why don't you love us? Points are gathered on the 485 for Australian work, and Australian work is easy to, as we've said, easy to display. You get 5 points for 1 year of Australian work experience. 3 to 5 years, you get 10 points. On a 485, you're only going to get 2 years of work experience, or if you're well organised. But most people, if they want to migrate, somehow find a way to get 1 year in the 2 years plus 3 months, 1 year in the 27 months to get the Australian work experience points. Now, education qualifications, degrees, bachelor's, master's are worth 15 points. Doctorate's worth 20 points. Doctorate. Unless you're a doctor who's doing a doctorate in medicine, doctors have a doctor of medicine, an undergrad, and maybe a bachelor of medical science. They get 15 points and they don't get 20 points. People who get doctorates are PhD students. A lot of doctors, at least 2 or 3 a year, make that mistake. I come across them. Now, it's an easy mistake to make. It's an easy mistake to make, but by listening to the podcast, you learn that if you're old school bachelor of bachelor of medicine, bachelor of surgery, or doctor of medicine, bachelor of medical science, doctor of medicine, it's 15 points, not 20. You've got to have completed at least. Sorry.
Oh, I was just tempted to make a joke about the online course that I've created, David, in learn SEO in 2 days and rapid website design, $39.97. Apply anytime. Are you telling me that won't count?
Unfortunately, not, Grant.
Oh.
Unfortunately, not. Your education institution, you're doing a degree. If you're doing a degree at an Australian university, you're okay. So you're doing it, as long as you're doing it at least a minimum of 2 years of Australian study in a recognised Australian institute, the Australian study requirement is met, and that's 5 points.
And at the risk of being serious for a moment, David, I think we should point out that there are master's programs and there are graduate certificates
Great point, Grant. Great point.
Don't meet the criteria. So be very, very careful that you have checked that the course that you are in, or look, for people who are considering studying, make sure that your course is accredited and will be accepted for the pathway that you are looking to undertake. David, go.
Basically, a course won't accept you for an international student if they're not CRICOS registered. CRICOS registration is the key. In terms of getting points, you need 65 points. You need to consider how you approach 65 points on your 485. Credential community languages are another way. That's worth 5 points. Those tests are good for 3. They're not easy. If you're a native speaker of Mandarin, native speaker of Italian, Spanish, Bahasa Malay, doesn't mean that you'll necessarily get success in the exam. It's worth preparing for. Another way to get excessive and extra points is to do a professional year if you are in IT, if you are in engineering, if you are in accounting, because that's going to give you another 5 points. What an engineer might do, for example, is work Monday to Friday in their discipline to get Australian work experience points, and Saturday, Sunday, do a professional year. So they get 10 points. It's a good way to go. You're very tired at the end, but you're very happy to have got the extra 5 points, because 5 points can make or break you.
Now, professional years are quite limited in which disciplines offer
accounting,
them
engineering,
currently.
and IT. Accounting, engineering, and IT. And providers charge, or the fees differ if you shop around, but you get what you pay for. Like anything in life, you get what you pay for. I won't tell you where to do a professional year, but I'll tell you where not to do a professional year. That I'll definitely do. I'm happy to do that, but I won't tell you where to do a professional year, just where not to go. Some are dodgy, some are good, some are not so good. If you're a super brain, you can get extra points. I'm not a super brain, Grant. Are you a super brain?
No, because I was still laughing at dodgy, because I think I'm going to insert allegedly in
allegedly there. Dodgy. Well, no, that's why I will tell. I'll never say anything on podcast on air, but I'm very happy in private consultation, to tell a student or a prospective professional year student where not to do their course. And by process of elimination, they can choose one that's reputable and safe and of value. You get 5 points, but you want to get something out of the course as well. If you're a super brain and you're doing a STEM qualification and it's a doctorate or master by research level, you get an extra 5 points. Science, technology, engineering, mathematics, communications technology. And if you're doing that, you deserve the 5 points. State migration is another way to consider getting extra points on the 485. You've got to get these points before your 485 expires, because you can't apply unless you've got over 65. And to do 27 months, you've got, or 23 months, or 23 months. If you do the graduate stream, you've got 18-month visa and about 3 or 4 months of processing, so 21. If you do the post-study work stream, you've got 24 months of visa and about 3 or 4 months, so 28 months to do it. So you've got time. What a lot of people need to consider is doing both, getting a job and doing professional year if they're in accounting, engineering, or IT. If they're in social work, they've got to get a job. Nursing, they've got to get a job. Medicine, they've got to get a job. Well, medicine, what happens with medicine is a little bit different, and we've done a podcast on it before, and we might do another one in the new migration year.
Can I just sort of rewind for a minute, David, or perhaps it's just restating because it does get complicated. There are things that you have to have in place prior to lodging your application for the 485. Police check, your health insurance,
course completion, academic transcript, letter of completion, Australian Federal Police check itself or Australian Federal Police check applied for, book and do your medicals, get your health insurance in place for your 485. Absolutely.
Yep. And then there are the things that you have time to do, which is to get your English language test done and to achieve the result that you are aiming for. And what you need to do is have your strategy sorted out. So you are not compelled to have it in line, but you need to have a strategy for securing the work you need. Where are you going to contact? Who is going to help you as a mentor? These are not things that are in the directions. They're not check off on the list, but you really, really, really must have determined a strategy that you are going to follow while you are the holder of a 485.
100%. While you're the holder of a 500 visa first.
A 500 first, and then because there's the things you must have to apply, and then once you have applied, you need to line up. You need to have what in hand to lodge, David. Let's just get that exactly right.
Yeah, one of the things that makes people focus, one of the things that makes them sharpen their mind is they don't have the legislative 6 months to lodge a 485 post-course completion, because if they finish a course in July, they've only got their visa till end of August. And if they finish a course in December, they get their results in December, they only have till March. So while there's 6 months to do it, legislation allows for 6 months. You've only got a couple of months at the end of your Christmas fee, at the end of a Christmas. If you finish a course at Christmas, you've only got a couple of months before your visa expires. If you finish mid-year, you've got even less. So you've got to have your academic transcript, your letter of completion. If you don't have proof you finished your course, you're dead. You're dead.
Now
your course.
You must have. Sorry, David. Your results. So your academic transcript
and completion, showing that your course was completed in English in Australia, full time.
Now you must have your police check and your confirmation of your new health insurance.
Correct.
before you can hit apply. Correct. Or submit.
Correct.
Is there anything else that you must have before you can hit submit? Because I just want to make it clear there are a couple of steps. You need to have.
You've got to finish a CRICOS registered course. You've got to satisfy all the course requirements. Your study has to have been in English in its entirety. You've got to have completed your course in at least 2 academic years, 92 weeks of study, and have completed it in not less than 16 calendar months. And you've got to have held an Australian study visa while you've done it. That's another thing.
That's okay. Good. So we've got all of that. Then you can press submit.
No, you've got to have. You've got to have your English. You have your English done and dusted, or be an American, an Irish person, a Canadian person. Have a passport of an English language jurisdiction, not South Africa, Grant. You cannot do it.
So, racist tropes aside, David.
I thought my South African accent was quite wonderful.
Yes, but we can't do that anymore. The same as Daryl Summers can't do his, or John Blackman should never be doing their Indian ice cream vendor.
My South African accent's the only, and we'll have to cut this out then. We got a 1 hour and 59, Grant. 1 hour 59 seconds. But the story is this: the story is UK passport holders, Canadian passport holders, American passport holders, and New Zealand passport holders, and Irish passport holders don't have to apply for their English test if they're doing a 485. I advise them to do it because it's good for 3 years and they can get it out of the way sooner rather than later.
Yeah, you get the points.
So the points.
So you need to have sat and passed in the band that you are aiming for prior to lodging.
100% correct. 100%.
And you need to lodge basically within 3 months of finishing your course.
The law allows 6 months, but the story is because your visa expires in March for Christmas and in August for June, July completion, you don't have 6 months.
That's right.
So that's why you use your time studying to do English. Yeah. You do your English.
And once you have completed all of those things, you can press submit. And so the health insurance is important, but do you need to have a further medical, other than the one that you did Absolutely. For your student visa?
You must do a 485 medical, front end loader, book it and do it.
Okay, so that must have taken place before you press submit, or
you can do it.
Does it only have to have been booked?
Book it, but try and do it. Get it out of the way. Try and front end load as much of it as you can. Booking, and because the processing is 3 to 4 months, we advise you book your medical as soon as you can at the end of your course. Get your English done in your second last semester. Don't do your English test in your last semester or in the period post completion of course. You run out of time. A lot of people leave it to the last minute, and it's very hard with COVID to get, well, here in Victoria at least, it's very hard when you get your IELTS, PTA rescheduled all the time.
Well, delays happen. So
happen.
So I want to again nitpick a little bit. If I have pressed submit and I have booked my medical, right?
You're okay.
Well,
as long as you've satisfied all the other criteria, of course.
Yeah. But my question is that even though we have an approximate time that it takes to process the visa, will visa processing actually begin or be completed before I have submitted the results of my medical examination?
What happens is it begins the moment you lodge. How long it takes will be dictated by whether you've done your medical or not, whether you need an overseas police check or not, whether they want extra from you, whether you have health issues. That can delay the processing. But once you put it in, it's in the queue.
Okay, and the point of asking that is that you do not get conditional acceptance of a visa. It will not be granted if you do not submit something that you need.
And it will be rejected if they ask you, or they exercise the discretion not to ask you. your visa will be rejected after a period of time.
Yep.
What they do is a
So,
matter of courtesy. They've been a lot kinder, a lot nicer in COVID. The federal government, the Department of Home Affairs, has been a lot nicer, a lot nicer.
and
What they do,
if you have engaged David or your own David surrogate, someone who looks probably
thinner, better looking than me.
I didn't want to use the words, but if you have someone who is authorised to lodge the application on your behalf, the department will generally reach out to them and say, "Hey, when's that medical coming?"
What will happen is they'll say, book and do your medicals. And if you don't book and do your medicals, they'll say, have you booked and done your medical? Or they'll just reject.
Yes.
So they'll tell you to do something outstanding. If you don't do it in the stipulated time period, or show that you've booked to do something within the stipulated processing time period, they'll reject you. They'll understand that if COVID leads to cancellation of a medical, as long as you let them know, that's fine.
And as long as if they ask you, you can evidence that it's been cancelled. Because, David, as we always say, do not tell them something has happened or is happening or did happen if it didn't happen. If you cannot evidence it, if you cannot prove it, it did not happen.
Correct.
It's the Loch Ness monster.
And if you've been smashed on a visa prior and you don't disclose it, and they find out, which they inevitably will, you'll undo all the good work you have done. So it's about being open-handed in every aspect, in every question, answering it truthfully and honestly. And if you don't understand the question, that's what people like me are for. Reach out. Don't lodge something with an assumption that you understand the question if you don't.
I've done it again. I'm going to have really annoyed somebody if they're listening. The people who
have we?
Who hate me.
We should probably remind people that everybody loves to listen to us on Apple and Spotify and various other platforms. We don't get many people listening live, do we?
Not on Facebook and YouTube, but we are. Look, we used to on Twitter, David, but as you know, Twitter have had a rejig where it's much more difficult now to stream there while we are streaming to other platforms. So, dear listener, if you're listening to us on the podcast, we're going to experiment over time with the different places we stream out to. And we're going to find the best fit. So Twitch, Instagram, if we can do new things with Twitter, we will. But David, at the risk of boring our regular listeners, I was just trying to get around to the point that there are things you need to do prior to hitting submit. And then once you have hit submit and everything is in hand, that's when you develop your strategy for getting your work experience lined up, ensuring that you have mentors, that you have professional referees, all that kind of stuff.
You need them before. Yep. You need to acquire them in the course of your study. What you also have to do is upload the proof that we've discussed. And if you don't upload it, you're going to be in trouble. And the 485 goes quickly. 24 months of visa, 18 months of visa can go very, very quickly. In the course of that, law can change. Occupations can be removed from relevant visa lists, added to irrelevant visa lists. It's a movable feast. You don't have permanent residency until you have permanent residency. Now, if you're thinking about selling something while you're on temporary residency, like a house, don't. Don't sell any house, apartment, anything, unless you've got permanent residency or citizenship. Okay.
Do not make life-changing decisions
under any shape or circumstance.
Yeah, until you have the email or the letter in your hand, the genuine article, the stamp in your passport, for want of a better analogy.
I mean, it's too late. It's too late if you've sold your house to fund your student visa. It's too late. So people who are listening, who are thinking about studying, don't sell your house, your apartment to come and study here. There's no guarantee you'll get permanent residency. You may not even like life in Australia. Do not get rid of your prized assets in your home country. It's too dangerous.
Don't give up your job as an influencer.
I think we've covered it, but basically this is a general information system, general information session where we look at what you've got to consider. It's about being organised. It's about not keeping your head in the sand while you study. It's about focus on your study first, focus on migration second, because if you don't focus on your study and you fail, you won't get to migration anyway.
And look, the only other thing I want to add, David, which is just a sort of a good on you, a shout out to the students who have probably been the most resilient students in 10 generations, I would reckon.
The international students who've stayed here and have studied here and have lived and worked here, we tip our hats to you because it's been incredibly tough. Tough for us, but even tougher for you. And we tip our hats.
It's been hard to feed yourselves. It's been hard to maintain employment. And
you know, Grant and I, Migrating to Australia podcast, are huge fans. You're brave as well. Not only resilient, but you're incredibly brave, and you'll make great Australian permanent residents. And if dual citizenship laws in your country allow you to make great Australian citizens as well.
Now, David, we had talked privately about reintroducing a discount, a coupon code or something. Are we at that point for this week?
I've got a few little things to do with my website, so maybe a fortnight away.
Well, that means I can be the bearer of good news, David. I'm about to produce, in lieu of no coupon code this week, this is the bonus for having got to the end of the episode. You can get a Migrating to Australia t-shirt if you can tell me why I was tired today and a bit scatty. We did mention it in the podcast. You're going to have to prove to me that you listened. I will take the best answer. And guess who determines the best answer?
You do.
I do. My podcast, my rules, my t-shirt, and to avail yourself of that. And I don't care whether you are a super fan living in Australia or a occasional listener or student based offshore. I'm not putting rules on that, but you have two options for entering. Grant at migratingtoaustraliapodcast.com, or you can hit me up on Twitter at WorkTheCloudOz, and what's that? Oh, David just showed me something that I know no one else will be able to read. But basically, he's telling me, hurry up, giving me the wind up. At WorkTheCloudOz on Twitter, or Grant at migratingtoaustraliapodcast.com. If you would like to get a t-shirt, there's going to be one winner, but to be considered valid, apart from telling me why I might be tired and scatty today in the podcast, you're going to have to tell me your color preference and size, whether it's men or women's. David Bongiorno, how does somebody reach out to you for the benefit of your professional expertise?
The fastest way, the fastest way is via Twitter at David Bongiorno, direct message. Very fast way to do it. Probably the fastest way. If anyone wants to call me, they can call me as well. But the fastest way, 24 hours, is at David Bongiorno. I have my phone with me, but not all the time. But Twitter, I I love Twitter dearly, and I'm often on Twitter, so you'll catch me there faster than any other way. At David Bongiorno.
And if you're one of those influencers that I've been trashing for the entire show, on Instagram, it's at David_A_C_Bongiorno.
I'm not an influencer on Instagram.
But wait, there's more. No, there's not. That's been Migrating to Australia, the podcast, the show, the event, the extravaganza. He's David Bongiorno, Australia's favourite immigration lawyer.
Good night,
And
everybody.
I'm Grant Williams.
Ciao.
See you on Tuesday.